Good morning, everybody. Our program this morning is coming to you from our old home base of Southern California, from the producer's studio here in Hollywood. We tried to put together a broadcast that would be in keeping with the occasion, this being Academy Awards night. And now that you've seen all the winners and seen some of the losers, we tried to put together a broadcast that would have something to do with motion pictures, with directing, with lights, with cameras, with actors, with the magic that is Hollywood and movies. And we have come up with a gentleman who does not do this very often, and we are pleased that he could be with us this morning. His name is Orson Welles. We'll spend 1 hour with him, and we'll begin from Southern California after these announcements, and I hope you'll stay tuned. Thank you. Orson Welles has been called many things by many people. He has been called a genius. He has been called the greatest director in the history of motion pictures. He has been called the least successful director in the history of motion pictures. He has been a man of controversy and a man of great accomplishment. And I am pleased that we can spend some time with him on the program this morning because he does not do this very often, since he doesn't have to and probably doesn't want to. He is from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Somebody once said to me, why are all the great people from the Middle West? Johnny Carson and Dick Cavett and yours truly and Orson Welles. And I said, well, because people from the Middle West are usually brighter than are most other people. So I welcome you here, and it's a good thing that two guys from southern Wisconsin can sit down and shoot the stuff here on network television for an hour.
What part of Wisconsin are you from?
Well, I will ask the questions and you will give the answers.
Oh, I see.
That's how I have this planned, and then if it doesn't work, we'll change it around.
But you wouldn't just tell me that?
I'm from Milwaukee, which is right near Kenosha. Yeah. When I was a kid, my father and I used to go down to Racine in Kenosha, and he'd call on hardware stores there, and then we'd go over to Lake Geneva and get malted milks and go back to Milwaukee. And when we used to drive through Kenosha, nobody ever said, whatever happened to Orson Welles? You should know this.
Now I do.
There was a play that you did years and years ago, which was written about in William Manchester's new book called The Power and the Dream. And the play was called The Cradle Will Rock. It was a play that the government tried to censor, or at least that was the implication.
No, they did. They stopped it dead.
They stopped it dead.
On opening night. Well, there was a very strange thing happening going on. This was the period of the WPA Theater. And there were congressmen standing up and denouncing the whole thing as a communist conspiracy. And I had just done Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe, which, as almost all of our viewers know, was written about 350 years ago, and a congressman stood up and denounced Marlowe as a well-known card-carrying communist. And that, that atmosphere was pretty prevalent. And The Cradle Will Rock was indeed a pro-labor, pro-union, pretty fighting radical opera by Mark Blitzstein, who was pretty far to the left. And the audience came opening night. And there they were, and the doors were padlocked. And the audience waited out in the streets. And we sent out Will Geer and people like that to play guitar and sing and talk to them while we looked for a theater. And an hour and a half afterwards, we found an empty theater, and we marched the audience. Luckily, it was spring, so this was possible. Marched them 12 blocks down Broadway to the empty theater, which we had rented. And the Actors' Equity said that the actors couldn't stand on the stage. So I told them to sit in the audience and that we'd do the opera there. Whenever they got a cue, they stood up and played it in the aisles. And by the time the play was over, all the theaters had emptied and all the actors came from all the other theaters and stood in the back.
To see what you people were doing in there.
And the play ran 2 years.
Now, you were defiant then, were you not? I mean, you were defiant in saying, I'm going to put this play on and we're going to find a theater.
We had an audience there. I think defiant is, I was simply obedient to the ordinary rules of the profession. If the people have paid and come to see, you've got to give them a show.
You were an obedient servant at that point.
You bet.
All right. Now, one might say, however, that you were a little bit defiant of the order not to put the play on, that you were a bit of a renegade or a bit of a rebel at that time. And I just wonder if you are still that, or now with your success and the legend that has grown around you, you have become more a member of the establishment and are not as anxious to challenge dictums and rules as you might have been back in those times.
The question is interesting and loaded with inaccuracies. The principal one of which is that I am now successful. I'm not successful. A successful fellow is somebody with a yacht or a house or a bank account.
No, no, no,
And
no.
I don't have any of those
No, no,
kind
no.
of things. In fact, I was making more money back then in radio as an anonymous radio actor.
This is if we measure success, Orson, only by the amount of money one has or the fine things,
Yeah,
the
but-
material
yeah,
possessions.
yeah.
But I would call somebody a success any man or any woman who has earned the respect of his peers, who is accorded the kinds of tributes that you were given by the American Film Institute earlier this year, a man whose name is taken in vain or given great praise for his accomplishments, such as Citizen Kane, for the marvelous scene with the mirrors that we saw in the retrospective that ran on the program that was on the networks here some time ago. By all those standards, you are a success. And using that yardstick, has your success made you less willing to challenge than you were in those times?
Oh, I think not at all. I think I'm much more of a renegade than I was then.
In what way?
Oh, in about every way. Because the real renegade has to be a little short on that final 10% of ambition. He has to be more interested in what he's doing than what he is. And in your early 20s, there's a kind of arrogance and ego that drains away when you get to be elderly. But the love of what you are doing does not diminish.
You still have a certain arrogance, though, do you not? You don't live in the United States or in the...
Do you think it's arrogant not to?
Well, I sometimes wonder. I don't know why you do not live here. And there...
Well, let me give you an answer.
All right.
A couple of weeks ago, a film of mine, which I've been trying to sell for distribution in America for a year and a half.
Is this film called Fake?
It's called Fake, opened in Paris in 4 theaters. They are standing in the rain for blocks outside all 4 theaters. I don't go there because they love me. They don't, but they buy tickets. I get work. I'm like a cherry picker. I go where the crop is.
I'm not sure that answers the question as to why you do not live in the United States, or why, in the words of some people, you've turned your back on Hollywood or on Los Angeles.
Well, I
or on-
never did live here, Tom. I never really did. The minute we finished on Friday night, I was in a plane and in Mexico, or at the very least in San Francisco. I never lived in this town.
Could that be why you can't sell that picture here? Why, if this picture is playing to people standing in the rain in Paris, why would not some smart distributor in this country buy that picture from you and make himself some money on it?
Oh, we can sell it to a smart distributor, but not on the right terms. And you know, people, old vaudevillians used to talk about being big in Minneapolis or something, and I'm smaller in America than I am in Europe, which means I can get work and I can get things put together there that I can't here, or can't as easily. It's not true that I can't. But I've never belonged to the Hollywood establishment. My goodness, the first contract I had when I came out here to this town was a kind of a defiance of everything that was established in the Hollywood industrial system. And I only got that contract because I didn't really want to make movies. I thought if I asked for something impossible, they'd leave me alone. I would have given in much earlier.
Do you think that because you never were part of the Hollywood crowd,
Oh, the crowd, yes, but not the establishment.
or the establishment,
Lots of friends here. I'm very, on very good terms.
but I would be less than
with
candid, as would you, if you didn't say you have a lot of detractors here, too.
Yes, I think that, but I have them all over the world.
I know. And is that because you're difficult to get along with, because you won't play ball, because you are a renegade, because you're just difficult?
I think the detractors can be divided into 2 groups. Those who have good reason to hate me and those who don't know me, you know. And the ones who have good reason to hate me, I don't know who they are, but they must exist, and they must have good reason.
What would be a good reason? Can
Well,
you think
you
of
know
one
that,
offhand?
you know that.
I mean, I knowing that you're charming, lovable, kind, gentle, Orson
Yes,
Welles,
I
can't
know that.
think of
Yes.
one, you
No,
see.
nor can I, you see. Nor can I. That's it. I think that to leap over that lull and get to the other division, I'd say that the detractors are people who genuinely don't like my work, or quite honestly and properly note that I don't gross what the Towering Inferno does, and quite properly note that I have never belonged to the establishment, any show business establishment, on Broadway either, and in radio I used to forbid the sponsors to enter the control room. You can imagine how much trouble that made and how quick they were to drop me the minute our ratings went down.
Not knowing how that worked, I couldn't imagine.
So that would
how
make
would
a
be,
detractor out of, you know, if I were a sponsor, I'd be a detractor of a fellow who'd do a thing like that to me. But they really do interfere with the work.
After Citizen Kane came out, and as you say, and as everybody knows, it did not make enormous amounts of money, but it was a successful film. It was a big picture. It was a spectacular, sensational film. At that time, there must have been people who said, well,
In fact, it was a small picture and had a very low budget.
But it became a large picture, all right. And I'm sure that there were persons who said, well, now here is Orson Welles, and we might expect him to become another director who produces important movie after important movie, as did Alfred Hitchcock or John Ford or John Huston or Otto Preminger, that you would begin producing pictures on once every 2 years. Orson Welles has his new picture out, and you didn't do that. Was it unfair of people to expect you to keep going?
Not a question of keep going. I made one picture after that, which was Magnificent Ambersons, which is, I think, I like a lot better than Kane, except for the last reel and a half, which was murdered by the people who took over RKO and who fired me. And at that time, it was about 3 years, almost 4, before I was offered a job as a director, or could get money as a director. I didn't refuse.
I guess what I'm trying to ask you is, were expectations assigned to you that you could not live up to?
No, the big expectations were that Kane would be a flop. The articles in the trade papers every week were that I was about to be thrown out for incompetence. And the misery on the part of that division we've been speaking about was that it turned out all right.
When there were stories in the trades that maybe you were incompetent, did you ever think to yourself, hey, maybe I am?
Well, I think anybody who is any good must question himself every morning when he gets up.
Yeah. Did you ever wonder about yourself that way?
Every morning.
Do you still?
Every morning.
Every morning.
Yeah.
That's why you're an obedient servant.
That's right.
Let me pause here for these announcements. We'll continue with Orson Welles in 2 minutes and 5 seconds. I want to spend some time talking about radio and about one of the most sensational radio programs of all time, which was H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, which was adapted by Mr. Wells and Company, the Mercury Radio Theater, back in 1936 or 1937, for CBS. And on the opposing network at the time was the Chase and Sanborn Hour with Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy, and they got the big ratings. Huh?
That's right.
So you decided you had to do something.
And The Wire, which I got next morning from Alexander Wolcott, read as follows: Dear Orson, this only goes to prove what I've always contended, that all intelligent people listen to Charlie McCarthy. Our ratings dropped quite dramatically that night, yes.
What, the night of War of the Worlds?
The night of the War of the Worlds.
Your ratings dropped that night?
It was the lowest ratings we had that year.
Well, now, somehow I'd been given to believe that your ratings were low in that program.
Our ratings were high, and they dropped on the night of that show.
Now, why
we had already sold our show commercially when we did the War of the Worlds. I had been on the cover of Time 2 years before the War of the Worlds. Everybody has an idea that that was the sort of beginning of what I can call my career.
Yes,
but it's not true, because we had a very successful radio show for 2 years. Our ratings were very high. We were giving Charlie a big run for his money.
I thought exactly the opposite was true, that you were dying on CBS, and you thought of this as a sensational gimmick to get an audience in.
Not at all, not at all.
That may account for the fact that so many people believed the Earth was being invaded by Mars. They were all listening to Charlie McCarthy, and the program, the Chase and Sanborn Hour, did not have Charlie McCarthy for the whole time.
No, they had Winchell at the end who came on and said, "It is not true, ladies and gentlemen, that the world has been attacked by the Martians."
But by that time, they were listening to you.
They weren't listening to anything by then. They were out with towels on their heads, running in the streets, you know.
Now, when you were putting that together, did you and the staff say, this will really terrify them?
Yes.
This will really get them?
Yes, but we didn't think it would get them that much or that many. You know, this was done for the benefit of a certain lunatic fringe and we didn't realize the extent of the fringe, which included some good friends of mine. You know, John Barrymore heard the program, and he had a kennel full of Great Danes. And he went out and opened all the gates and said, you know, fend for yourselves. You know, believed that it was the best thing he could do for the beast. You know?
When the broadcast was over, the police were...
The police were already in the control room during the broadcast, not knowing who to arrest.
And what did they say to you? Or what did you say to them?
The police couldn't say anything. By that time, the people were phoning, you know. We were taking calls. People were saying, you know, I don't know if you think you're funny or not, but my wife is in the church on her knees praying and so on, you know. We were saying, sorry, sir. You know, all of this is going on. And I had a dress rehearsal in my theater, and I had to leave. And, you know, a dress rehearsal for a play is much more important than anything like that to all the actors. So I went, it was a different cast. I went, you know, I said, you know, we did a show. And I said, never mind, get to work on the show. And during the intermission, I went out for a minute. Now on Times Square, I see my name going around that Times Square building, you know,
the news
the old
flasher,
news thing. And I came back and said, hey, fellas, you know my name? And they said, please, stop talking about radio. It doesn't matter. Stay on the show. And then suddenly in came 2,000 newspaper men and killed the dress rehearsal. So I tried to get back to my hotel, which was the St. Regis. And I couldn't get to the hotel because crowds gathered around it. This was all within a few hours.
And what did you think then? Hey,
Well,
Orson,
everybody thought...
Maybe you've overdone this?
No, everybody thought I was done forever, except myself and I think 2 or 3 other people. I thought it was a riot, very funny, and could do nothing but good. But, of course, in CBS it was very funny, because there wasn't a vice president seen in that building for 2 weeks. You know, they had the elevator man sitting behind the desk. You know, they didn't know what their responsibility was, you know, because all kinds of things happened. You know, people went out and did injury to themselves.
There were requests that you...
There were regrettable incidents. I met a fellow...
Weren't there also some requests that you be put away?
Really, the requests were not that. The public wasn't angry, really, by the next day. The newspapers pretended to be, because they'd been fighting radio as an advertising medium all these years. And here was the chance to get it. And they were wrong. After 3 days, it was apparent that the whole American public thought it was a riot and very funny, and that the newspapers were out of step, and they had to get into step. But reading the newspapers, it looked as though I'd never get another job and be lucky not to go to jail and all the rest. Of course, there was nothing to put anybody in jail for, but somebody did an imitation of that show in Chile, not long afterwards, 2 or 3 years afterwards, and he spent 5 years in the lockup. They had a law in Chile. Now they have laws that you can't pretend something is true on the radio when it isn't. But they were written because of that show.
Except when the commercials come on, then you can pretend anything that you want to pretend. Of all the things that you have done, you did some few things for television, I think, two.
Not much, but radio is the thing I love most of almost any medium I've ever been in. I've never enjoyed anything so much as radio.
Everybody I've talked to who was in radio during that time, when radio was the national entertainment medium, says that was it. Why? What was it about that?
It was just more fun. It was live, you know, with a wonderful excitement of what can happen when anything can go wrong, and such extraordinary things did go wrong. And it was, my show was, first of all, I had 2 periods. One as a radio actor, when I began very humbly and was blackballed. Joe Cotton and I were kept out of radio for quite some time because we used to giggle during bad dialogue, and they thought we'd behave ourselves if we were separated, and then they finally kept us out entirely. But then suddenly I was a success, and I was making, without my name being used, a couple of thousand a week. And in order to do that, they used to hold an elevator for me at NBC and CBS so I could make the conflicts, and I wouldn't rehearse. So I'd come in the door, they'd hand me a script and say, 80-year-old Chinaman, dying. And I'd say, oh, come to me, son of the... Out, into the taxi down.
Wait a minute, let me have 80-year-old Chinaman dying again.
Yeah.
Let me have it.
I used to do it better. I suddenly realized I shouldn't have gone into that.
80-year-old any person, living.
No, I did all the parts. They just told me I was the shadow, as you probably know.
Lamont Cranston.
Lamont Cranston, playboy by day.
I never ask anybody to do that.
I couldn't do it.
You could not do it right now?
I couldn't do it then. I had to get some. I had to get somebody to do the laugh and then imitate it right away. I never did it right for the sponsors or anybody else. I was quite poor at the laugh, but I imitated somebody who was good at it.
Now, I used to imitate you doing that, and I thought I was pretty good at it. But
You were
now...
better than I am, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It was one of those situations. It was embarrassing. It was the only recorded show I did on acetate in those days, of course. And I was in an embarrassing position once, which I can't describe on a family medium. And at a key moment...
It's almost 1:30 in the morning. They're all asleep.
At a key moment, and you can imagine what that might have been. A voice came onto the radio saying, the shadow knows. Crime does not pay. I had to go right out to the dog races.
You mean that you were doing something else when your voice came on the radio?
Yes.
I think I
Yes,
got
you
it.
see?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, or trying to.
Did you want to use that?
About to.
Well, I hope it
And
wasn't.
thwarted by an acetate.
That must be a scary feeling, you know, to be in that position and hear your own voice saying,
yes,
the
you
shadow
know,
no?
crime
The shadow
does not pay, you know. And it didn't. It didn't. That was the only recorded show. All the rest were live. And as I said, I had two careers. One was as an actor, and I used that money for my theaters to put money. I'm the only person who ever put money dishonestly into a government project, into one.
How so?
I kept using my money from radio to get props and scenery and so on for the WPA so we could get it on in time. Because of all the bureaucracy, it took forever to get shows on. And then I had my own show, and that was the most fun in the world because we had every big star who ever lived every week. We did an hour show with a 40-piece orchestra and marvelous writers, and it was just a great, exciting thing. And our only big competitors were DeMille, and who had, you know, Welcome to Hollywood, Lux Radio Theater, you may remember, which took 5 days to rehearse, and we did ours in one. Which made it more exciting because it was worked terribly fast and with marvelous actors and writers and everything.
Maybe the fact that you had such control then led you to demand that kind of control in movies. Huh?
That's why I demanded it, because I was having so much fun in radio and in the theater that movies didn't tempt me all that much.
When you asked for that control, did you honestly believe that you were smarter than, better than, quicker than all the other people, and that they were dolts and you had to keep them out?
Not at all. I believe that the only good work I can do has to be my own particular thing. I don't think I'm very good doing their thing. It isn't because I was smarter. It was because, in this case, because I was dumber. I'd never seen a movie camera. And the only way I could have control would not to have somebody around say, you can't do that.
Yeah, there are a lot of those people around, as you know.
Always.
Hey, we can't do that. How about the picture? No, can't do that.
Yeah. I was lucky, though. I had a great cameraman. I had Greg Tolan, and whatever I said, he'd say, well, it can't be done, but we'll do it. And that's almost unique among
Forgive me,
those guys.
But all the things that are talked about in your life as being innovated by Orson Welles, how many of them were a cooperative effort by Orson Welles and people like Greg Toland and Henry Mankiewicz?
An enormous amount of them, of course. Of course, and I have, you know, there's some things that I innovated, which I don't get credit for, and I get credit for some things I didn't do at all, like ceilings.
Yeah, everybody says...
I didn't at all. There's ceilings in movies all over the place before mine. Just not that many.
Yeah, 20 minutes of ceilings.
Yeah, sure.
Now, before I pause here for these announcements, let me tell you that this will be on the air the night of April 8th, and make certain that you're not trying to do something else when you should be watching this program. Have you got it?
Got it.
We will continue. We will continue after these announcements. One of the people that you have had a relationship with was Harry Houdini. You had a great interest in magic at one time.
Yeah, I still do.
And still do.
I still,
do you perform?
Yeah,
Do you do tricks?
Yeah, I'm a pro. I've worked a couple of times in Vegas. I worked in nightclubs in Europe sometimes.
What do you do? Close-up or great
Everything.
big illusions?
Everything.
Or what's your favorite? What is the Orson?
Mentalism now, you know, that kind of stuff, but I do the whole bit.
What, you tell me my Social Security number? Or?
Yes, for better pay.
Wouldn't want to spoil you, sir. You know, now that you mention that, you said a while ago that you're not successful in terms of material possessions or great wealth or great income. There are so many people who have the reputation, such as yourself, of being independently wealthy, that you've made millions of dollars and you can just float about the world doing as you please for the rest of your life. And yet that is not true, or if I'm being presumptuous
No,
in
I
saying...
spend it all on my movies. I'm my own principal backer. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a functioning director.
But you don't have great wealth.
No, how could I? Nobody who puts money into pictures has great wealth. Ask the banks.
Are things expected of you that maybe you cannot afford, that you have to maintain a certain level of opulence or affluence?
No. I don't maintain any level of opulence or affluence at all. I just look rich. That's all.
Well, not in this.
Fat is the word.
Not in this. Who shines your trousers for you? But are you expected to drive big cars or to
I don't think so,
to
no.
tip large at restaurants?
Well, no, I tip large at restaurants because
You eat big.
I eat big and I feel sorry for the waiters. But I'm a big tipper, but that's not to maintain a position. It's because I think it's only very rich people can afford to tip small and live with themselves. You know, that's a special breed, rich people. They watch the dimes, and the rest of us are pretty easy spenders in that respect, but that's not to keep up a front. You know, I've never been much interested in
But
that.
you don't feel any pressure that hey, I'm Orson Welles and I have to do these certain
I
things.
don't even stop and say, hey, I'm Orson Welles.
You don't?
You know, no. No, that would be an embarrassment.
How so?
Well, don't you really think it's an embarrassing just to address yourself and to
By your name, yes.
yes,
Except,
or in any way.
except
to
that I can't
think of
imagine
your
how it would
image.
be, because you've had so much written about you, and you have so many people who are interested in what you do. And you were on the cover of Time magazine at the age of 20 or 22, and you were so far ahead of your time in achievement. And you must sometimes think of yourself as being a special person. You just must.
Well, you have to protect yourself and not think of that person. You know, just as there are subjects we don't think about. You know, it's like avoiding the mirror. You either like to look in the mirror or you don't. I don't like to look in the mirror. Well, there's an obvious answer to that. But I don't much like to look in any form of mirror.
And so you don't worry about yourself.
I think as little of myself as I can, because I think that really, I'm going to get a little heavy here. I think that's really what all of the self-respecting religions are about. They are trying to prove that the self is our enemy. And the only way that people, you know, who've got to be well endowed with ego, as anybody in any form of show business has to be, we wouldn't stand up in front of the public and ask them to be quiet. But, and listen, anybody who has that kind of presumption out of protection, self-protection, it seems to me, has to fight it and think of the work instead of yourself, and not the work as a reflection of yourself.
You just used the word religion. Are you a religious man?
Yes, I'd say so. Not formally.
You don't practice
no,
Catholicism
no,
or
no.
Judaism or
I'm sorry to say
Protestantism
I don't.
or any of those?
I'm sorry to say I'm without that kind of faith. I wish I did have it, but I can't make that.
But when you say religious but not formally, what does that mean? Now, for me, it means not hurting people and trying to do right by others and
But that's ethics,
to,
isn't it?
well, but are not ethics some form of religion?
Part of it, some part of it. But you also have to include the sense that there are things bigger than yourself, and one of those conceptions is the idea of God, and the other is the idea of goodness, and all of that kind of thing. I think religion consists of holding firmly to the notion of things bigger than yourself. I think that's a religious attitude. Life.
And when you say something bigger than yourself, do you mean people
Even movies, even the job we're doing, even this box is bigger than we are. Much bigger.
What about
and we must have respect and love for it and not think of it as a mirror.
What about the future? Is that bigger than we are as well? Those who will follow?
You mean humanity's future?
Yes.
Oh, I take a dim view of that.
You do?
Yeah.
How dim?
Oh, terribly
Well,
black.
example, the world is going to end?
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Martians will invade?
No, nothing is entertaining as that, I'm afraid. I think we're invaded by people.
I don't follow.
Well, there are too many of us, and we're the only animal on the planet we are obviously capable of some kind of semi-divinity, but we're also obviously sick and bent on destruction, and we now have weapons which we are not grown up enough to handle. We have machines to live with that we can't deal with, and a technology that's way beyond us.
And what about ourselves, our own reproductive faculties, which are increasing the population of the planet even more than any sophisticated machine or a nuclear device or something like that?
I don't say there's no hope. I'm not without hope, but it would be very hard to be optimistic at this moment.
We will continue with Orson Welles and his less than optimistic feelings after these announcements. Just one more thing about your own personal philosophy, your own personal religion, and that is your concept of afterlife or hereafter or your own immortality. Do you have any feelings on that? What do you think about dying? Are you afraid of death?
No, I'm very interested in death, and always have been. I think about it all the time. I have ever since I was born. I think it's very hard to enjoy life unless you live in the presence of death. But as for life after it, I haven't any idea at all. Be glad to send you back a message when the news comes.
You know, they tried that once. They got 4 people together, and I've told this before, and I can't remember the names, but who was the guy that played Tarzan? Lex Barker? Is that does that ring a bell?
He was one of them.
And he
Elmo Lincoln was another.
Yes, and but Weissmuller. Yeah, but Lex Barker is dead. Is that guy? I don't want to kill somebody here who's not killed. Anyway, the National Enquirer magazine or newspaper got Lex Barker and 3 other very prominent people in the entertainment arts to write a message in an envelope and seal it in their safe in New York. Well, when Lex Barker died, his instructions from the Enquirer when he was alive were to send back this message from the other side, and through a medium it would be written down and the 2 things would be compared. And they compared them, and they never arrived at a definitive conclusion as to whether or not Lex Barker was really, in fact, talking from the other side. And I just wondered if you thought that that was possible.
But you know, there's an origin. The origin of that experiment is with Houdini, whom you mentioned before, who made a great career of exposing phony mediums, but deeply wanted to believe in spiritualism at the same time. And he wrote a message which he gave to Beatrice, his wife. And he came from Racine, by the way, right next door to Kenosha.
That is true.
Same town as Spencer Tracy. And that message was supposed to come through, and if it would come through, there was some 10 or 20,000 bucks for the medium who could make it. And it went on about 20 years with a seance every year with every big, heavy medium on it, and it never came through.
Do you believe in any of that stuff?
I don't believe in spirit messages. Whatever there is, there can't be anything that sordid.
Some of it is awfully persuasive, though, don't you think?
Spooks, no. Spooks meaning that I think that maybe we cast reflections of ourselves into the future. I think there may be some weird thing like that. But we're always behaving like idiots when we're spooks. So I think it's like a distorted, like an echo chamber in time. I really don't think the spooks come back. I believe in all kinds of spooky things. Because they happen. It's kind of silly to pretend they don't. Precognition and clairvoyance and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. This is why I say sometimes,
no argument about that.
Sometimes you wonder because strange things do happen.
But I don't really like the ectoplasm and the, Little Feather, the Indian princess, tells me that Uncle Harry is happy.
I wanted to ask you one more thing about magic, and that was whether you have any of the Houdini secrets in your possession.
I can only tell you that Houdini was one of my teachers. I had 3 great teachers, and Houdini was only a casual one because he did it as a favor to my father when I was a little boy. My other teachers were also great magicians, but I took formal lessons from them. But I was a little tiny kid. I used to sit in the Hippodrome, in the dressing room of Harry Houdini, and he said, you can't become a magician until you can do the pass, which is a move with a pack of cards which has been superseded now by card workmen for the last 30 years. It's really useless now. But you have to do it.
But at the time, that
yes,
was the
it
thing
was
to
the
be able to
basis,
do.
ABC.
Yeah.
And here I was studying it away, fumbling away, and the door opened, and a fellow came in from, I think, a famous magician supply house, and said to Harry, I've just got a great new vanishing lamp. He says, good, I'll put it in the show tonight. And he had told me that I must practice every trick 1,000 times. And I was up to about 200 when I heard these words. And I've never really felt the same about anything.
If he can do it the first
Yes.
time, why can't we all? Let me pause for these announcements. We will continue with Orson Welles in about 2 minutes and 5 seconds. This probably isn't going to produce any great information, but what was it like?
I like that as the beginning.
Well, because it's going to be a rather stupid question. I've about run out of brilliance, as I'm sure you realize by this time, and it's very late. What was it like growing up in Kenosha, Wisconsin? What were you like as a little kid? What kind of a kid were you?
Well, I didn't grow up in Kenosha.
Or wherever you grew up.
But
Somebody over there get the phone.
are we still on the air?
Yes, we are.
All right.
Sure, we just had somebody
interested in the fact that the phone was ringing. I must have been intolerable as a child, I would think. I was a musical wunderkind, and I played the fiddle, you know. And I think children who do that, you know, ought to be treated
with suspicion.
or by W.C. Fields. I must have been, yes, totally insufferable. You know, I was precocious and smart about music. I wasn't interested in acting or anything like that. I was into music, but I think musical prodigies are terrible pains in the neck, and that's what I was.
A musical prodigy.
Yeah.
Are you still a prodigy? You know, you've been called that so many times.
Oh, call it. What does it mean? A musical prodigy is
No,
just somebody who
I don't mean
practiced
musical,
harder,
but
you
I
know.
mean, then you were a prodigy in radio, and then you were a prodigy in movies, and maybe that's just a tough handle to have to carry.
I don't carry handles. If I have them, I don't pay any attention to them. I think, you know, I suppose that if one lived to be 200 years old, you'd say you were insufferable at the age of 80, and I guess we are always hateful. But you only can see how lousy you are when when the lens is wide enough, and you can look back at that little toddler. And I certainly wouldn't like to have to take him to the art gallery.
Mm-hmm. Looking back to that little toddler, are there any things about you that you would change now? Anything about the way you've lived your life? The
Almost
things that
everything.
you've done? Really?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Don't you have pride in what you've done?
I never understand those people who say I have no regrets. You know, it's incomprehensible to me.
What are you?
Mine are as countless as the sands of the desert. You know, I can't imagine not having a regret about almost everything.
What are some of your big regrets?
Big regrets? Oh, I suppose that I fell in love with movies. You know, you can fall in love with a girl and have her ruin your life. And I fell in love with movies, and I have done less in my life than I would have if I hadn't.
What would you have done had you not fallen in love with movies?
I don't know, but something that didn't take so much time and cost so much in money and energy and everything else. I can't change this condition of love, but I think I would be better off without it.
There's a picture that you're still making, is there not, called The Other Side of the Wind?
It's really done. We're just making pickup shots and...
But it's been going
scenes.
on for 4 years, has it not?
Well, it started, and then it stopped because the job that I thought I was going to get didn't come through, so I couldn't finance it anymore. And then a couple of years went by, and I got a backer, and we shot a couple of weeks, and then that backer ran away with my money as well as his. And there's been that sort of history. It hasn't been shooting for 4 years. It's just a matter of weeks. But it just took all that time to get it together.
Do you like to finish a picture and be done with it? Are you happy when it's all done and cut and goes out to be printed and into the movie houses?
No. No, because you always hope you can make it better. You know, and of course there's a time comes when you have to leave it alone. It's That's why I never go to see my own movies.
People who do this sort of thing, whether it's what you do or what I do here, I will be unhappy when our time together is over because you'll go to your car and you'll go your separate way.
Done that better.
And I'll go to my car and go my separate way, and all these people and the lights will go down, and it's kind of like a little death that takes place here when a show is over.
Right.
All right, and you don't like that any better than I do.
Oh, I hate it. It's just awful. I hate every kind of goodbye. And every time those lights go out, it's a little death and a little goodbye. God, it's true. And I hate to see it, because that's the proof of how all your suspicions were right, you know. I never look at myself on the screen or look at old movies, because the only way you can keep going is to imagine you're better than you are. And I've got a marvelous opinion of myself as long as I keep my eye well averted from that monitor, you know.
Of all the people that you have worked with in pictures, actors I'm talking about here, do you have any that you really like greatly or dislike greatly that you talk about?
I've never had, I've liked, you know, it sounds like Pollyanna. I've got on terribly well with actors all my life. I really have never had trouble with actors, either as a director or as a fellow actor. And I have nothing but happy experiences and some wonderful. I think actors are nicer people than civilians imagine they are, you know. Particularly when they're working. I'm not crazy about actors away from the work. I don't go to actors' restaurants and all that, because you get an awful lot of them when the lights are on. And when you go away, it's nice to talk to other kinds of people. But no, I've never had one of those real bad experiences.
Why is it, and I asked this question of another director whom you know, Peter Bogdanovich, who also likes to appear before the cameras.
Yes,
Why
he's a leading actor in my movie.
Why do directors want to be actors and actors directors?
Why do comics want to play Hamlet?
I don't understand that. Or singers want to learn how to dance, or dancers learn...
Well, I'll tell you about Peter Bogdanovich. He is...
Well, I'm sure you will.
At least as good an actor as he's a director, and I think better. He's a marvelous actor. So he's right. I think that yearning to get there is because he's great at it. And wait till you see John Huston in my picture. He gives a performance such as I've never seen on the screen. What's he doing back of a camera?
He's been there for a long time and been quite good at it.
Right, but the question still holds.
All of a sudden,
Question
he had a
still
yearning, or somebody such as
Well, I
yourself.
saw him as an actor before he ever came to Hollywood, too. So, it's, you know, it's... I think people, if you can do it, you can do anything.
When you are not doing pictures, and when you are not involved with financing them, or shooting them, or casting them, what do you do for fun? Now, you don't have a yacht, you told me that.
No, I sometimes hustle my friends' yachts, you know, but I don't have any. I do whatever's going. I have lots of interests. The only exception is spectator sports.
You don't like those?
I don't like them.
Why not?
I have no competitive sense. That's why here we are on the night of the awards, and I don't care who wins any game I'm in, or who wins any contest, either for best actor or best shuffleboard player on the good ship, whatever it is.
Lollipop, I think.
Lollipop, that's
Yes.
the word, and thank you, sir.
No, you wouldn't, because I suspect that your biggest competition is Orson Welles. You do compete with yourself.
I try not to. I hate competition in itself. I hate the idea of getting better than. I think it's great to be up there. It's lousy to be down there. But to be the top is both dangerous professionally and tends to dizziness.
Before you leave, would you give me the name of your voice coach?
Yes, John Huston's aunt.
Now I know. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Walter Huston's sister.
Well, the time has gone for this, and I've enjoyed it immensely. And I hate the small death that will occur when these lights go down, but I have no other choice except to thank Mr. Orson Welles, and we will continue and tell you about tomorrow's program after these announcements.